We've had news of a serious disturbance at HMP Birmingham, Her Majesty's Prison, Birmingham, yesterday or the day before. And some sources are already describing this as the most serious prison disturbance in Britain since the Strangeways riot in Manchester in 1990. If that's the case, then it's obviously a very large scale disturbance. And this is coming on top of two other prison disturbances at HMP Lewis in East Sussex and HMP Bedford. But this one sounds like it was pretty large scale. The Justice Secretary Liz Truss has vowed that the perpetrators will deal with the full force of the law. Now, how that works inside, whether that's extending sentences or I don't really know. Obviously, she is under political pressure to respond. And inevitably, there's going to be lots of questions over A, why this particular riot started, but also the broader issue of the conditions in English and Welsh prisons. A little bit of background about Birmingham. It's also known as Winson Green Prison, after the neighbourhood in which it's located, which is close to central Birmingham. It's a Victorian prison dating from 1849, and it's a large prison, a capacity of 1,450. Um, Apparently, it's also run by G4S, the security company. Um, Apparently, according to a former inmate who was interviewed by, I think, Sky News, he said that there was grievances that were building up for things like, for example, inmates were denied warm showers in the morning and so on. Um, I think it's common sense that if you deprive people of basic things um, that may seem like trivial things, they can build up. So, for example, being denied cigarettes or warm showers, this sort of thing. You know, as someone who's conservative on crime, I I'm under no illusions that you have to have a system that works, and I don't think it's a contradiction to accept that people who terrorize society face consequences, but also want a system that works. Clearly, we have a very big problem in this country. Firstly, in England and Wales are currently 85,500 people incarcerated. Now, I don't agree with those who say that only violent offences are serious. There are some non-violent offences which are just as damaging to victims. Say, for instance, you have robbers who steal a pensioner's life savings. It may not necessarily involve violence, but that has a very damaging impact on the victim. There's crimes that involve theft of sentimental items. There's psychological crimes. There's a lot of crimes that don't necessarily involve violence, that still have a big impact on the victim. I don't like the term trivial crime at all, actually. Every crime, or most crimes, are crimes against a person and they have an impact. Whether it be, the long suffering shopkeeper who has to put up with thieves constantly stealing his or her stock, or, a violent assault. Crime has an impact. And as someone who was forced from my home by yobs, I really do understand this. Um, but you could be conservative on crime and expect that people face consequences for what they have done, whilst also understanding that having a situation that is going to boil over, for example, by having overcrowding in cells, or a situation whereby inmates are, I don't want to say provoked, but given unnecessary and punitive punishment. Now, to me, depriving inmates of cigarettes or warm showers is punitive. It's not. It's not going to teach anyone anything. Um, I don't think prisons should be comfortable places. I don't think they should be. That's why I mean I don't agree with the Nordics model of basically having places that resemble nursing homes or cheap hotels. That's how the Nordic prison system looks to me, and I don't agree with that at all. Um, but at the same time, I don't want sort of situation like that in some Southeast Asian countries where it becomes hellish, and the overcrowding is such that it's basically a powder keg situation. Or indeed, an American style system where you have universities of crime. People go in and become, like, they might go in a shoplifter and they come out a hardened gang member, or even in some cases a hardened Islamist terrorist. Um, so clearly we need to get this right. For me, the issue is not the prison population, although it is probably the highest in Europe. And that's just England and Wales at 85,500 figure. I don't know what the figures for Scotland and Northern Ireland are. So, on top of that, we could be looking at about 100,000 in the whole United Kingdom. Um, I don't think it's necessarily the prison population, but how effective prison is. I think as an institution, prison isn't a bad thing. It has a purpose. And I am 100% against those who call for penal abolition. Sometimes they masquerade as penal reform as what they actually want is penal abolition. I think that is reckless and stupid. But it is also punitive to have a system whereby people are going in and it's a university of crime and they're just coming out to reoffend. Clearly, that is not a good situation. So, what specifically has happened in Birmingham needs to be looked at in order to prevent it happening in that particular prison. But if you have a prison, let's say for the sake of argument, that's designed for 1,500 inmates and it has 1,800 inmates, clearly you're going to have tensions. Because if you have, let's say, 5 people to a cell that's designed for two, obviously that's going to boil over. And you cannot allow a situation of anarchy where inmates start running the wards. I think one big problem may have led to the riot in Birmingham based on some of the media coverage that's been going on is so-called legal highs that have been coming in. Legal in the sense of legal on the outside, this is my understanding of the situation, but they're banned on the inside. Now the problem is inmates are getting very innovative in terms of how they get them in, even using aerial drones. I mean, this is an absurd situation. The inmates are actually getting drones to fly drugs into their cells. Um, and this really just exemplifies the previous video I made about drugs. This is the sort of problems it causes. I think where you have inmates who have an addiction problem, there needs to be a specialized approach to that. But what you cannot allow is a situation where inmates start controlling how prisons are run. So governors need to be given a lot more authority to basically do what they're doing. Now, that extract I mentioned in my previous video on the subject from the David Cameron book was from 2006, 10 years ago. And it appears the situation may have got worse since then. Um, Clearly, we are looking at a powder keg situation. Birmingham is just the latest, but there's no reason why this isn't going to happen elsewhere. So, what is the solution? It may well be that there will need to be less less incarceration, like less um, sentences that result in a custodial sentence. But I'm not sure if that's the right approach because there are blatantly some crimes that should result in a custodial sentence, including some non-violent crimes. I don't accept that if someone has been shoplifting 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, clearly in those situations a community sentence, they're literally laughing at it, then yes, it should be a tougher sentence. Building more prison spaces perhaps is a plausible answer. Now, obviously, there's always going to be people who will argue, oh, we don't want a prison near us. But this comes down to a utilitarian question. Do you build a prison in a new prison where, yes, you're going to have local residents complaining that there's a prison in their neighborhood, but then it's a utilitarian question because you're going to get inmates sent from all over the country. Usually that's the case. Inmates are, moved around. Um, so it's a utilitarian issue. You're going to have locals complaining, but then the plus side of that is going to be creating more space, which reduces the burden on existing prisons, which plausibly, reduces the sort of tensions that exist from overcrowding, and therefore reduces the pressure on prison guards, prison governors. Um, I think it seems to me that there is a morale issue among the prison service, i.e., those who are employed by the prison service. I'm not sure if it's a pay issue. I'm not sure if it's the sort of working conditions, but clearly this needs to be looked at across the board. Now, Liz Truss is saying the full force of the law needs to be applied and so on. As Justice Secretary, you would expect me to say that, but that shouldn't be the only approach. Clearly, there's root causes going on here that need to be looked at more in detail. I don't, I don't want to go down a line where it's a case of inmates are basically making demands and saying, "Give us what we want, otherwise we will riot." In the end of the day, they are offenders and they are there for a reason. Um, but at the same time, if there are punitive punishments that are creating a situation where people feel, they're being pushed into a corner, that's not right. Coming up to Christmas, especially, there's going to be tensions. People are not with their family, etc. Um, I think at a time, there needs to be common sense brought into this. So inmates should be allowed to see their family because it's just not letting them see their family is punitive. But what liberals need to understand, and what those who advocate sort of a really lenient approach need to understand, is that ultimately these people are in prison for a reason. Punishment is part of justice, and it shouldn't be the only part of justice. And there should be other things looked at. Clearly, there's a range of factors that has led to this riot, and it's not a situation that anyone wants to repeat. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for the public. It's not good for the staff that have to put up with it, and it's not good for inmates either. Um, so, in the case of Birmingham, the specific issues need to be looked at. But there are broader issues going on here, and it is only a matter of time before it happens somewhere else. So, I think that the best answer may be temporarily a reduction in custodial sentences, or at least a freeze on the number of custodial sentences, not to increase the prison population. But it shouldn't be a case of, well, we've had these disturbances in prison, therefore we're just not going to jail people. That's nonsense. But there should be a review as to how prisons are run, and there should be a comprehensive look at what is going wrong here. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I'm sure there's many other things to say. Let me know your thoughts, and if I can, I'll respond to those. I just don't agree with those who think that the answer to problems in prison is abolishing prison. Prison itself is not the problem; it's how it is run. So there shouldn't be punitive punishments that drive inmates over the edge. Prisons should be humane, but they shouldn't be you know inmates should be deprived of liberties that law-abiding citizens have. That's common sense. And it should not be a case that inmates are basically making demands that give us this or we will riot. That's nonsense. So in that sense, I agree with this trust, but it shouldn't just be punishment as a response to this. There needs to be a broad-ranging evaluation of what is really going on here. Clearly, when you have people going in and we need to come out and reoffend, that is not good enough. But I just don't accept that the answer to this is, that people who commit serious crimes should escape prison. That is not the answer to this problem. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I'm sure there's many more things to say, but I'll leave it there for now. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.